Midnight rendezvous. The clock struck midnight as the moon hung high in the velvet sky, casting its silvery glow across the deserted streets of the city. The world seemed to be holding its breath, wrapped in the stillness that only comes with the darkest hour. In the distance, the soft hum of the city was a mere whisper, barely audible over the rustling leaves and the occasional hoot of an owl. Amelia walked through the empty streets, her heels clicking softly on the cobblestones. She had always been a creature of the night, drawn to its mysteries and secrets. There was something intoxicating about the way the world transformed after dark, shedding its daytime facade to reveal a more intimate, shadowy existence. Tonight was no different. Dressed in a sleek black dress that clung to her curves, she moved with a grace that came from confidence, her long dark hair cascading down her back like a waterfall of midnight. She had received the letter 3 days ago, a simple piece of parchment folded into an envelope that had been slipped under her door. The handwriting was elegant, almost old-fashioned, and the message was brief: midnight. The old clock tower. Come alone. There was no signature, no indication of who had sent it, but Amelia had known instantly that she would go. The old clock tower was a relic from another time, standing tall and imposing at the edge of the city. Once a symbol of progress and innovation, it had long since been abandoned, left to crumble and decay as the world moved on. It was a place steeped in history, shrouded in legends and ghost stories that only added to its allure. As Amelia approached the tower, she felt a shiver of anticipation run down her spine. The large wooden door creaked as she pushed it open, stepping into the dimly lit interior. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of dust and old wood, and the silence was broken only by the steady ticking of the massive clock above. She made her way up the winding staircase, the sound of her footsteps echoing in the empty space. The higher she climbed, the more her excitement grew, a heady mix of curiosity and a thrill of the unknown. Who had sent her the letter? And why here, of all places? When she reached the top, Amelia found herself in a large, open room with tall windows that offered a panoramic view of the city below. The moonlight streamed in, illuminating the room in a soft, ethereal glow. And there, standing by the window, was a man. He was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a black coat that seemed to blend into the shadows. His back was to her, but she could see the strong lines of his jaw and the tousled dark hair that framed his face. There was something familiar about him, something that tugged at the edges of her memory, but she couldn't quite place it. As if sensing her presence, the man turned to face her. Amelia's breath caught in her throat as she looked into his eyes. Deep, dark eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 secrets. They were eyes she had seen before, in dreams and fleeting glimpses, always just out of reach. "Amelia," he said, his voice low and smooth, like velvet. "You came." "I had to," she replied, taking a step closer. "You called to me." He smiled, a slow, knowing smile that sent a shiver of desire through her. "Yes," he said, "I've been waiting for you." There was an intensity in his gaze that made her heart race, and she felt an inexplicable pull toward him, as if drawn by an invisible force. She had always prided herself on her independence, her ability to remain detached, but something about this man, about this moment, was different. It was as if she had been waiting for this encounter her entire life, without even realizing it. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he closed the distance between them in a few long strides. When he was close enough to touch, he reached out and gently cupped her face in his hand, his thumb brushing over her cheek in a tender caress. "I am someone who has watched over you for a long time," he said, his voice a soft murmur. "Someone who has seen your strength, your beauty, and your loneliness." His words sent a thrill of recognition through her, and she felt a strange sense of déjà vu, as if she had heard them before, in another time, another place. But before she could dwell on it, he leaned in, his lips brushing against hers in a kiss that was as gentle as it was electrifying. The world seemed to dissolve around them as they kissed. The tower, the city, the night itself fading away, until there was nothing but the two of them, locked in an embrace that felt both timeless and inevitable. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her close, and she melted into him, surrendering to the passion that ignited between them. For what felt like an eternity, they stood there, lost in each other, their kisses growing deeper, more urgent. His hands roamed over her body, exploring every curve, every inch of her skin, and she responded with equal fervor, her own hands tangling in his hair, clutching at his coat, as if afraid he might disappear. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing heavily, their foreheads resting together as they tried to catch their breath. Amelia's heart was pounding, her body alight with desire, but there was also a sense of peace, of completeness that she had never known before. "Who are you?" she asked again, her voice trembling slightly. He looked into her eyes, his expression tender but inscrutable. "I am your past, your present, and your future," he said. "I am the one who has always been with you, even when you didn't know it." His words were both comforting and unsettling, and Amelia felt a flicker of unease, as if she were on the brink of understanding something profound and terrifying. But before she could grasp it, he pulled her into another kiss, silencing her thoughts and drowning her in sensation. As the night wore on, they continued their rendezvous, exploring each other in a dance of passion and desire. The world outside the tower ceased to exist, and time itself seemed to lose meaning as they lost themselves in each other. It was a night of secrets and revelations, of unspoken promises and hidden desires, and when the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows, Amelia knew that nothing would ever be the same. But as she lay in his arms, her body still trembling from the intensity of their lovemaking, a question lingered in her mind, a question that she couldn't shake, even as sleep began to claim her. Who was he, really? And why did it feel as though she had known him all her life? The answer, she knew, would come in time. But for now, she was content to bask in the afterglow of their midnight rendezvous, holding on to the memory of his touch, his kiss, and the promise of more to come. As the first rays of the sun broke through the clouds, casting the room in a golden light, Amelia closed her eyes and drifted off to sleep, a smile on her lips. Whatever the future held, she knew she would face it with him by her side, the mysterious stranger who had stolen her heart in the shadows of the night. As the sun rose higher, painting the sky with hues of pink and gold, Amelia stirred from her sleep. The warmth of the morning light gently coaxed her awake. But when she reached out for the man who had held her so close through the night, her hand met only empty space. Her eyes fluttered open, and she found herself alone in the vast room at the top of the old clock tower. She sat up, her heart sinking with a strange sense of loss. The room, which had felt so alive in the moonlight, now seemed cold and empty in the daylight. The only sound was the relentless ticking of the clock above, a reminder of the passage of time and the fleeting nature of the night before. But he had been real, hadn't he? The feel of his lips on hers, the way his hands had moved over her body, the deep connection she had felt. None of it could have been a dream. She touched her lips, still tender from his kisses, and felt the lingering warmth of his embrace. There was no doubt in her mind that he had been real, that their encounter had been something extraordinary, yet he was gone. Amelia stood up, the wooden floorboards creaking under her weight, and walked to the window where they had first met. She looked out over the city, the morning bustle a stark contrast to the serene silence of the night. She wondered where he was now, if he was watching her from some hidden corner of the city, or if he had vanished as mysteriously as he had appeared. A flicker of movement caught her eye, and she noticed a small piece of parchment lying on the windowsill, half hidden under a stray beam of sunlight. With trembling fingers, she picked it up and unfolded it, her heart racing as she read the words written in that same elegant, old-fashioned script. "This is only the beginning. I will find you again when the time is right. Until then, remember me in the stillness of the night, when the world is quiet and your heart calls out for me." There was no signature, just like before, but the words filled her with a strange mixture of hope and longing. She read them over and over, committing them to memory, as if they were a lifeline to the mysterious man who had changed her life in just one night. Amelia tucked the note into her dress and took one last look around the room before heading back down the winding staircase. As she descended, her thoughts were a whirlwind of emotions: excitement, confusion, yearning. She had so many questions, so many things she wanted to know about him, but she would have to wait. The note had made that clear. When she stepped out of the tower and into the bright morning, the city felt different to her, as if it were alive with possibilities she had never noticed before. She walked with a newfound confidence, her mind replaying the events of the night. The way he had looked at her, the feel of his hands on her skin, the sound of his voice whispering her name. The day passed in a blur. Amelia went through the motions of her daily life, but her thoughts were consumed by the memory of the stranger. She found herself drawn to places she had never visited before, wandering through hidden alleys and quiet parks, as if searching for something or someone. Nightfall brought a sense of anticipation, her heart quickening as the sky darkened and the moon rose once again. She sat by her window, staring out at the city, waiting for some sign, some indication that he was near. But the hours passed, and the night remained quiet. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Amelia's life returned to its normal rhythm, but the memory of that night never faded. She often found herself returning to the old clock tower, standing in the very spot where they had met, hoping to feel his presence again. But each time, the tower was empty, and the only sound was the ticking of the clock, counting down the moments of her life. Despite the passage of time, Amelia never gave up hope. She lived her life, made new friends, pursued new interests, but always, in the back of her mind, she carried the memory of that midnight rendezvous and the man who had promised to return. One evening, almost a year after that fateful night, Amelia found herself at a grand masquerade ball. The room was filled with people dressed in elaborate costumes, their faces hidden behind ornate masks. Laughter and music filled the air, and the atmosphere was electric with excitement. Amelia wore a deep red gown that flowed around her like liquid fire, a matching mask obscuring her features. She moved through the crowd, mingling with strangers, but her mind was elsewhere. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen, that the night held some secret just waiting to be revealed. And then she saw him. He stood across the room, tall and imposing, dressed in a black suit with a silver mask that covered the upper half of his face. His eyes, however, were unmistakable, those same deep, dark eyes that had haunted her dreams for so long. Their gazes locked, and time seemed to stand still. The noise of the crowd faded away, the music dimmed, and all Amelia could hear was the pounding of her own heart. He began to move toward her, weaving through the crowd with the ease of someone who belonged in any setting, and with each step, her anticipation grew. When he reached her, he took her hand in his, lifting it to his lips in a gesture that was both chivalrous and intimate. The touch of his lips on her skin sent a jolt of electricity through her, and she knew, without a doubt, that he was the same man who had kissed her in the old clock tower. "Amelia," he said, his voice as smooth and enchanting as she remembered. "I told you we would meet again." She smiled, her heart swelling with joy and relief. "I've been waiting for you," she admitted, her voice trembling with emotion. "And now I'm here," he replied, his eyes never leaving hers. "But this time I won't disappear. This time I'm here to stay." He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her as they began to dance, the world around them fading away once more. As they moved together, their bodies in perfect harmony, Amelia felt the weight of the past year lift from her shoulders. All the longing, the unanswered questions, the sleepless nights. None of it mattered anymore. They danced through the night, lost in each other, their connection deeper and stronger than ever before. It was as if the time apart had only made their bond more unbreakable, their desire for each other more intense. When the first light of dawn began to creep into the room, they slipped away from the ball, hand in hand, and made their way through the quiet streets of the city. They didn't need to speak. Their silence was filled with understanding, with the knowledge that they had found something rare and precious in each other. As they walked, the city around them began to wake, but Amelia knew that this time she would not be left behind. The man who had captured her heart was by her side, and together, they would face whatever the future held. The sun rose on a new day, and with it, a new chapter in their lives. But as they walked into the light, hand in hand, Amelia knew one thing for certain. No matter what happened, she would always remember that midnight rendezvous. the moment when everything changed, and she found the love she had been searching for all her life. The morning sun bathed the city in golden light, and as Amelia and the mysterious man strolled through the quiet streets, the world seemed to glow with new possibilities. The night's enchantment lingered between them, an invisible thread connecting their hearts as they walked in comfortable silence. Amelia couldn't stop glancing at him, marveling at the way he seemed both familiar and utterly enigmatic. His presence was a paradox, a soothing calm and an exhilarating thrill all at once. Every step they took together felt like a promise, a prelude to a future filled with adventure and discovery. "Where are we going?" she finally asked, her voice soft but curious. She wasn't afraid. Rather, she felt an overwhelming sense of anticipation, as if they were on the cusp of something extraordinary. He smiled, a slow, enigmatic smile that made her pulse quicken. "There's somewhere I want to show you," he replied, his voice rich with warmth and mystery. "A place where the past and the present converge, where our story truly begins." Amelia's heart fluttered at his words. She nodded, trusting him completely, and let him lead her through the winding streets and narrow alleyways of the city. They passed through neighborhoods she had never seen before, places that seemed to exist outside of time, with old, ivy-covered buildings and hidden gardens tucked away behind wrought-iron gates. Eventually, they reached a secluded park, its entrance marked by an archway of blooming roses. The air was fragrant with the scent of flowers, and the sound of birdsong filled the air, creating an atmosphere of peaceful serenity. Amelia felt a sense of wonder as they walked along the cobblestone path, the world around them bursting with life and color. At the center of the park, nestled among ancient oak trees, stood a small, elegant pavilion. Its white columns gleamed in the morning light, and the delicate latticework of its roof cast intricate shadows on the ground. The pavilion was like something out of a dream, a place where time seemed to stand still. "This is it," the man said softly, leading her to the steps of the pavilion. "This is where it all began, many years ago. This is where I first saw you." Amelia's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He turned to face her, his dark eyes filled with emotion. "This is where our souls first crossed paths, long before we ever met in the flesh. This is where I knew that I would one day find you." A wave of emotion washed over Amelia, her heart swelling with a love so profound it almost brought tears to her eyes. "But how?" she asked, struggling to understand the depth of his words. "How could you have known me before we met?" He reached out and took her hands in his touch gentle but firm. "There are things in this world that cannot be explained by logic or reason," he said. "Some connections are forged long before we are born, destined to find each other no matter the obstacles in our way. You and I are one of those connections, Amelia. Our souls have been bound together across lifetimes, waiting for the right moment to reunite." His words resonated deep within her, awakening memories she hadn't realized she possessed. Images flashed in her mind, glimpses of other lives, other times, where they had stood together just like this, facing an uncertain future, but always together. She saw herself as a young woman in a different century, dressed in flowing gowns, standing beside him in places both familiar and foreign. Each life was different, yet the bond between them remained unbroken. A thread that wove through time and space, pulling them together again and again. Tears welled in Amelia's eyes as she looked up at him, her heart overflowing with love and gratitude. "I remember," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "I remember you." He smiled, his eyes shining with the same recognition, and pulled her into his arms. "And I remember you," he murmured, holding her close. "I've never forgotten you, Amelia, not in this life, nor any of the others. I've searched for you in every lifetime, knowing that one day we would find each other again." They stood there for a long moment, wrapped in each other's embrace, the world around them fading away. It was as if time itself had paused, allowing them this moment of perfect clarity, where the past and the present merged into one. Finally, he pulled back slightly, cupping her face in his hands. "This time," he said, his voice filled with determination, "we will stay together. No more waiting, no more searching. Our journey begins here, now." Amelia nodded, her heart swelling with the certainty that this was where she was meant to be, with him, in this moment, ready to face whatever the future held. "Yes," she whispered, her voice steady and strong. "We're together now, and nothing will separate us." With that, he leaned down and kissed her, a kiss filled with all the love, passion, and promise of the lifetimes they had shared, and the one they were about to embark on. The world around them seemed to pulse with life, the trees swaying in the breeze, the flowers blooming more brightly, as if nature itself was celebrating their reunion. When they finally broke apart, hand in hand, they stepped into the pavilion. Inside, they found a small, intricately carved wooden box sitting on a pedestal in the center of the room. Amelia felt a sense of déjà vu as she approached it, as if she had seen this box before, in another time, another life. He opened the box, revealing a pair of matching pendants, one shaped like a crescent moon, the other like a star. They were beautifully crafted, made of silver and studded with tiny gemstones that sparkled in the light. "These have been with us through every life," he explained, taking the moon pendant and placing it around Amelia's neck. "A symbol of our bond, of the love that transcends time." She took the star pendant and fastened it around his neck, her fingers trembling with emotion. "We will never lose each other again," she vowed, her voice filled with conviction. As they stood together in the pavilion, wearing the symbols of their eternal love, Amelia knew that their journey had only just begun. The road ahead might be filled with challenges and uncertainties, but they would face them together, their love guiding them through whatever lay ahead. And as they walked out of the pavilion, hand in hand, the sun shining down on them, Amelia felt a profound sense of peace. She had found her soulmate, her partner in every sense of the word, and together they would create a life filled with love, adventure, and endless possibilities. Their midnight rendezvous had led them to this moment, and now the future was theirs to shape, one day at a time. As Amelia and her soulmate left the pavilion, the world outside seemed brighter, more vibrant, as if the very air hummed with the energy of their reunion. They walked hand in hand through the park, the morning sun filtering through the trees and casting dappled shadows on the ground. Everything felt alive, as if nature itself was rejoicing in their love. The city had awakened fully now, the streets bustling with activity as people went about their daily routines. But for Amelia, the world had shifted on its axis. What had once been ordinary now felt extraordinary, infused with the magic of their connection. She was acutely aware of the man beside her, his presence grounding her, while also making her heart soar. They wandered through the city, exploring hidden corners and quiet alleys that seemed to belong only to them. Every step they took felt like a new beginning. Every glance exchanged a silent promise of the life they would build together. There was no need for words. Their shared history, the weight of the lifetimes they had lived apart, spoke louder than anything they could say. As the day wore on, they found themselves on the edge of the city, where the hustle and bustle gave way to rolling hills and open fields. The landscape was serene, a patchwork of green and gold under the afternoon sun. Amelia felt a sense of calm wash over her, as if this place too was part of their story, a chapter waiting to be written. They came upon an old stone cottage, nestled at the base of a hill, its ivy-covered walls and thatched roof, giving it a timeless quality. It looked as though it had been there forever, untouched by the passage of time. Amelia felt an inexplicable pull toward it, as if the cottage was calling out to her, urging her to step inside and discover its secrets. "Let's go in," the man suggested, his voice soft yet filled with the same curiosity that Amelia felt. He led her to the door, which creaked open with a gentle push, revealing a cozy interior that felt immediately welcoming. The inside of the cottage was warm and inviting, with a fire crackling in the hearth and soft, worn furniture arranged around the room. There were shelves lined with books, their spines worn from years of use, and the air was filled with the comforting scent of wood and herbs. It was a place where time seemed to stand still, where the outside world faded away, leaving only the two of them. Amelia walked around the room, her fingers trailing over the surfaces as if trying to absorb the essence of the place. There was something familiar about it, something that stirred memories deep within her. She paused in front of a small table by the window, where an old, leather-bound journal lay open, its pages filled with elegant handwriting. She picked up the journal and began to read, her heart pounding as she recognized the words. It was a chronicle of their past lives, written by someone who had witnessed their love story unfold over the centuries. The entries described their meetings and partings, their moments of joy and sorrow, their undying commitment to finding each other again and again. Tears welled in Amelia's eyes as she turned the pages, each one a testament to the strength of their bond. She could see herself in the stories, could feel the emotions that had driven them to seek each other out, no matter the obstacles. And with each entry, she felt a deeper connection to the man beside her, the one who had always been there, waiting for her. He stepped closer, reading over her shoulder, his breath warm against her neck. "This was written by someone who knew us, who understood the depth of our love," he said, his voice filled with awe. "It's as if they were chronicling our journey, ensuring that we would remember, even when we were apart." Amelia nodded, overcome with emotion. "It's incredible," she whispered. "All this time, we've been searching for each other, and now, here we are, standing in the place where our story has been preserved." He took the journal from her, closing it gently and setting it back on the table. Then he turned to her, his eyes filled with love and determination. "This place, it's ours. It always has been. I can feel it in my soul. This is where we were meant to be, where our love has always led us." Amelia felt a surge of warmth at his words, a sense of belonging that she had never experienced before. "It feels like home," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Like we've finally found the place where we belong." He smiled, his expression softening as he cupped her face in his hands. "Because we have," he whispered, his lips brushing against hers. "This is where we'll build our life together, where we'll create new memories and continue the story that's been written in the stars for us." Their kiss was slow and tender, filled with the promise of a future that they would shape together. The world outside the cottage seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them, wrapped in the warmth of their love. It was a moment of pure, unfiltered connection, a reminder that they were exactly where they were meant to be. When they finally pulled apart, the room around them seemed to glow with the energy of their bond. Amelia knew, deep in her heart, that they had found something rare and precious. A love that transcended time, that had survived countless lifetimes and would continue to do so. "We'll stay here," she said, her voice steady with conviction. "This will be our home, our sanctuary, a place where we can be together, always." He nodded, his eyes shining with agreement. "And we'll fill it with love, with memories, with everything that makes us who we are." Together, they began to explore the cottage, each room revealing more of the life they would build together. There was a kitchen, filled with the tools for cooking hearty meals, a sunlit bedroom with a large, inviting bed, and a small study lined with books that seemed to hold the wisdom of the ages. Every corner of the cottage felt like it had been waiting for them, like it had been designed with their love in mind. As the sun began to set, casting the sky in shades of pink and gold, they settled into the living room, the fire crackling warmly in the hearth. Amelia rested her head on his shoulder, her heart full as she gazed into the flames. "We found our place," she said softly, her voice filled with contentment. "And no matter what happens, we'll always have this." He kissed the top of her head, his arms wrapped around her protectively. "Yes," he agreed. "We'll always have each other, and that's all we need." In that moment, surrounded by the warmth of the fire and the love that filled the room, Amelia knew that their story was far from over. They had found each other against all odds, and now they would face whatever the future held together, secure in the knowledge that their love was eternal. The night fell softly around them, and as they drifted into a peaceful sleep, the stars outside shone brightly, as if celebrating the reunion of two souls who had finally found their way back to each other. The journey that had begun with a midnight rendezvous was now a journey without end, a love story that would continue to unfold, page by page, for all eternity.